We're live. Go.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to celebrate You've Got Mail. I'm Ariana with Love Sweet Arrow, and I have the amazing and great pleasure to introduce our three authors here with us today. So, starting with the author of You Got Mail, Marina Adair is a New York Times author whose fun, flirty contemporary romances have sold over 1 million copies. She has hit #1 overall in Amazon Kindle Paid, and her St. Helena Vineyard series was made into the original Hallmark Channel Vineyard movies: Autumn in the Vineyard, Summer in the Vineyard, and Valentine's in the Vineyard. She currently lives in Northern California with her husband, daughter, and 2 neurotic cats. And then over to romance author Livy Hart, who is also moderating this event. She has 2 children, too many Funko Pops, and a husband who's working on the railroad, literally. She currently resides in Dallas, Texas, where she enjoys long walks on the concrete and people watching at malls so big they have their own zip codes. When she's not writing, she's bickering with her KitchenAid stand mixer, road tripping to her sleepy Florida hometown, or sipping espresso on her Nona's porch. And then lastly, but certainly not least, we have US Today and Wall Street Journal bestselling romance author Avery Flynn, has 3 slightly wild children, loves a hockey-addicted husband, and is desperately hoping someone invents the coffee IV drip. She lives with her family, including the dogs Gravy, Pepper, Tater Tot, and Eggnog, who are either sleeping or guarding the house from squirrels, as well as the cat Dwight, who is totally plotting world domination. My cat as well. She lives outside of Washington, D.C., and she loves to chat with her readers. You can email her at averyflynn.com and join her reader group, the Flynnbot, on Facebook. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to these authors, but quickly, I just want to go over some logistical elements of how the event's going to go. Our 3 lovely authors are going to speak for about 45 minutes. And in the meantime, me and Marissa are going to be monitoring the YouTube chat. So if you guys have any questions for any of the authors, please leave them in the chat and they'll answer those questions in the last 15 minutes or so of the event. Okay, Livy, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Awesome. Hello, hello. What I was hearing in our bios is that we may or may not be interrupted by feral cats, feral children, hockey pucks. So, we'll just do the best we can in case we have any
Yeah.
goodness, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so what I was thinking is that I would pose a question, and then so we don't feel like we have to talk over each other, I'll pass it to Marina, and then she can pass it to Avery, and then I'll maybe say something if it needs to be said, and then we'll just start that cycle over if that's good with everybody.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, we are all very, very lucky, fortunate, happy to have books out this summer with Entangled Publishing, and that's kind of what brought us all together. So we'll be talking a little bit about our releases, but also, our backlist and all that good stuff. But for today, our main focus is You've Got Mail. So please, if you would, just tell us a little bit about where that spark of inspiration came, when you knew that it was going to be a book, and kind of what inspired the idea.
So this is my baby. You've Got Mail.
Such a
And
pretty cover.
It is.
thank you. I love it. And actually, Avery, I have to say, in the new book I'm writing right now, my hero's dog is a Great Dane who thinks he's a cat, and his name is Tater Tot. I had no idea you had a
Oh my
dog named
God.
Tater.
That's hilarious. Well, my tater tot is a Jack Russell Chihuahua mix, and he's 100 million years old and is as big of a jerk as you imagine. So I look forward to your tater tot.
Yes, my Tater Tot's a total jerk. Like I said, who thinks he's a cat. So he like sleeps on the counters, walks between people's legs. Only he's 150 pounds and like built like a horse.
Yeah.
So, but the idea
That's
for my
funny.
book actually came from a brainstorming session with my editor. And she came up with this idea. I guess there was a TikTok phenomenon where a woman who had no idea of dating or no interest in dating, her coworker filmed her talking about if she wanted to date her ideal guy. And she put it up on TikTok and it went viral. And so we thought, what a fun backstory idea for a book. And I had wanted forever to write like a sandwich generation where you have a grandmother, a mother, and a teenage daughter living in the same house. And so I thought, wouldn't it be fun if you had the grandmother who dated men who were way too young, the mother who didn't want to date at all, and the teenage daughter who dated men who were way too old. And I've always wanted to tell my husband's parents' story is my father-in-law is gay, and he was gay or he's always been gay, but it was at a time when you couldn't come out of the closet. So he thought if I could make it work with anyone, it would be my best friend, but she didn't know. And so obviously it didn't work out, but they were still best friends up until the day my mother-in-law passed away. And they thought they were platonic soulmates. And so till the day they died, they still had this beautiful relationship. And so in my book, they found their platonic soulmates. They still lived together. They ran a coffee shop together. And so my heroine, her parents are getting older and they need someone to help run the coffee shop. So there she is in her 30s, and she's working the teenage shop, or in the shop she worked in as a teenager as a barista. And in comes in her ex-husband with his young fiance with a big twinkling diamond on his finger. And he has no time or interest in helping raise the teenage daughter. So her best friend says, well, if you were to date, what kind of guy would you date? And she spits out the perfect guy, and then lets it be known that she's never had a man-made orgasm. And this goes viral on my version of TikTok. And her life overnight turns into an episode of The Bachelorette, with all these men showing up with roses and declarations of love. So she goes to her neighbor, who they're in a neighbor war together. He's her nemesis, and said, look, I will help you get your life together if you will help me and get America and my family off my back. So it's a fake dating relationship type of story. It was so much fun to write. I love the brainstorming with my editor. I've never done that before. It was so creative and so much fun. And the book turned out to be, I think it's a really fun romp, funny, witty, strong heroine, alpha male with a really tender, gooey inside. And I think you guys will love it.
Awesome. I remember thinking when I read that the sandwich piece was so, and her parents, it all felt so real that I was like, this has to come from reality, but I don't want to be that person who's like, so tell me which of your parents, who is this based on? But it was so realistic. I just felt it from page one pretty much. Avery, do you want to tell us a little bit about Walk of Shame?
Walk of Shame is super fun, sexy rom-com. It is a woman who in the beginning is left at the altar by her hockey goalie fiance. He dumps her via FaceTime while she's literally in the church bathroom getting ready, waiting for him, going, where are you? And so she has a similar, fuck this whole idea of dating thing. And then she ends up sort of accidentally having a one-night stand with a guy who is a former hockey player. He's now what is basically a goalie whisperer. And it turns out that they have to end up working together. I love how we always force these people together because it's fun. It's like the whole representation of Now Kiss. So they now kiss, and then they find out they're forced together because he is the goalie whisperer for the goalie who happened to be the guy that left her at the altar, and she has to help him so that he gets over a case of basically the hockey yips. They don't really call it that in hockey, but it's what it is. It's the yips. And it's really fun, and they just keep accidentally having sex, even though they're trying really hard not to. It's horrible. At one point in time, she hides in a closet in the office just to try and not run into him. And he's texting her later going, I saw you. I saw you do that, you big chicken. So yeah, it's really fun, and there's a lot of ensemble characters who are a good time as well.
That sounds amazing.
It really does. And like the phrase accidentally had sex or whatever was in the blurb, it was like, and we accidentally had a one night stand. Oops, I fell. I fell again. It's
I did it. I keep doing it. Yes. Yeah. I think instead of the heart knows, the body knew. The body knew.
right.
So that's what happened. Yeah.
And in Marina's book, you know, they're agreeing to do this thing together despite being nemesis. So there is that forced
I like it all.
element that we have to like shove into every book because otherwise they would just avoid each other. And where would the fun be in that? But
There's no fun.
Astrid and Cal, like they're not avoiding each other in the way that maybe they would like to. They can in fact do the opposite of that and continue to bang. So we love that.
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to skip down to a question about your writing process because both of
Tell
you
us about your book first.
Yeah.
We want to hear all about your book.
Yeah. Nice try. There's no skipping.
There's
Yes.
no thing. Okay. So the book I put out this month is called The Great Dating Fake Off, and it sounds like the Great British Bake Off. So and there's a giant cake on the cover, so naturally people are like, "Oh, it's about baking," and I'm like, "You would think," but actually no. It's a kind of feuding families, Hatfield McCoy vibes, Italian wedding. And the premise is that my hero and heroine are fake dating other people. So Nora, my sort of bookish, kind of dreamy girl, agrees to help her best friend get his family off his back. So that's your normal setup for a fake date, right? Like, I'm going to do this with you. We're definitely not going to fall in love, right? So that's what you think is going to happen. But this other guy who's fake dating his best friend because she hasn't told her family that she's gay, he's going as her date. So you have this girl and this boy who are at this wedding as sort of the outsiders. They're both kind of out of their element because they're both from small families and they're sort of thrust into this world of very dramatic, loud people who all hate each other. And they're just trying to, you know, be supportive friends. So even though it's a fake dating book, it's actually more of a star-crossed lovers because they like each other from the jump, but they can't act on it because that would be a betrayal of their friends who they're there to be in fake relationships with. And because of how Italian people are, this is not a one-day wedding. It's a 7-day wedding in the Adirondacks. So it's not like, okay, we just have to get through today. We have to get through this parade of misery. And then maybe if we survive it on the other side, you know, then maybe we can go on a date. But of course, they don't wait the 7 days because when you're young and hot, why would you, right? So they get caught. And that's kind of where the book just sort of explodes. So you have one of those very dramatic scenes where everything falls apart. It's like dominoes falling. They find out you're faking it. No, you're faking it. And it's kind of like you see those animated Spider-Man memes of everybody pointing at each other kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the energy. And so, yeah, it's my big Italian train wreck. And it's a lot of characters.
I love it. It sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So, Marina, tell us about writing. Do you like quiet, loud? Are you a pantser plotter? All that, you know, technical stuff that people love to know.
Super quiet, which is hysterical because my husband loves music on, television on, a million things going on at one time. I don't know how he does it. I like to be in my room or in my office or on the couch, complete quiet with my cats in my lap. And I am a plotter. My outline before I even write the first letter of chapter, before I even write the word chapter 1 is, I guess that's 2 words. I have like a 30,000 word outline of just dialogue, bullet. So total plotter. I'm very organized. I have my MFA in screenwriting. And in screenwriting, you have very little opportunity to put in description or whatever, and it's all moved forward through dialogue. So I think that's why I write my outlines that way. So yeah, I'm a very meticulous plotter. I don't know how people are pantsers. It fascinates me, and I'm so impressed by pantsers.
Right. I think
it's fascinating and frightening at the same time. Like you're like, you're crazy.
Yeah.
You're also you're a plotter, Avery.
Well, I used to think I was until Marina just explained what she does.
Changed everything.
So not nearly as thorough. Um, no, I am definitely a plotter, and I like to know where I'm going. I need to know the end of my journey. I am not a fan of spontaneity. So none of that works for me, but I will get overly excited and I will have like the first part, I know where I'm going. And at this point in time, I've written so many books. My outlines are pretty slack ass, honestly. They're there, but they're slack ass. And I'll get really excited and I'll start before I'm done. And then I get to a point and I'm like, I did it. I did it to myself again. And that's when I turn and I'm like, help. And I have some great best friends who will sit with me and help me, figure out where to go next. Thank God.
Yeah,
So,
having
brainstorming is so much fun when you're plotting, though. So I love that you brainstormed. You've Got Mail. I think that's half of the fun because it can be a very lonely experience, planning your book. So being
Yeah.
able to do it and get that feedback and then yes and each other and do all that stuff is super fun.
Well, I have a
All right.
plotting partner that I work with all the
Oh, I
time.
like
I've had the same plotting partner for 10 years. But my editor reached out to me for the project. So I knew she had a very specific book in mind, which I've never had that experience before. So I
That's
knew
pretty
I
cool.
wanted to plot with her so that I delivered the book that she wanted. So we didn't go
Mhm.
through 15 rounds of edits to get her what she wanted. But I also wanted to write the book that I was excited about.
Mhm.
So that way we collaborated to make sure we were both pleased with the outcome.
I
So
love
have you
that.
ever done that with an editor, Avery, working with Entangled, or Livy, either one of you?
I have. Yeah, I have done that actually frequently with Liz. And it has
Same. That's who it
always,
was with.
yeah. Yeah, no, she's brilliant at that.
Yes.
And she thinks in a very analytical way about stories and how they should work and how characters and where you should be hitting things and all of that stuff that as somebody who doesn't have an MFA or I went to school to be a journalist, so I was a newspaper reporter for years, so a lot of that crafting stuff was just through osmosis. So being able to work with somebody who's a brilliant brain stormer, and I think very giving on like, well, what do you think of this? What if they did this? Nah, that's not really going to work. What if we go this way? Oh, okay. And then, work a very good give and take relationship. I think it's awesome. How about you, Libby?
Yeah, I was thinking as you were both talking about how when you write that first, second book, you're it's not hubris because you don't know better, but you're like, oh, I will absolutely figure it out when I get there. But you kind of go into it with like a kernel of an idea and you're like, absolutely, there's no way this is not going to work. And now I've only written 5, but that's still enough that I can see that every single time I can't write until I have more information every time. So now going into this book, I wouldn't even write the first chapter until I knew what was vaguely going to happen, like halfway through, all the different beats. And that definitely comes from Entangled's, very, very loyal to the story structure there. And, that all starts at the top with Liz. And so my editor, who I've been lucky enough to work with on all the books, so there is that sort of cohesiveness in the process. She works a lot like Liz. And so it's a lot of, making sure your story is intact before you actually say a word. And for somebody who was only ever complimented on my voice, that was kind of humbling because I was like, oh no, I can make it funny. And they're like, no, it doesn't matter if it's funny, if it doesn't make sense. So that was a lesson I definitely had to learn many times, but I hope, I'm halfway to learning it at least, okay, it has to have a compelling conflict or else it doesn't matter, what joke.
Yeah, it's such a bummer, that and the part of actually having to put all of the things that are in your head that need to be on the page when you get that edit note back and they're like, this makes no sense, why did you do this? And I'm like, well, because of this and this and this. And then you look back and realize, oh, I never actually wrote that part, it was just in here. And
head.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for like, brainstorming, my editor and I will talk on the phone, and I can only write so much. And then no matter what, there's always something that I get my edit note back, and she's like, "You didn't put the entire scene we talked about that one time on the phone." And I'm like, so just matching the vision, like you said, Marina, like when somebody approaches you with an
Mhm.
idea, which one of my five was, very much somebody else's baby at first. And I had to find a way to bring myself to it, but not stray too far from her vision. I was like, okay, how do I mesh these things? And it was exactly what you said. You brought your husband's parents into it, so it still felt so much like yours, but
Mhm.
also we're still giving the structure that they wanted from you. And it's kind of a beautiful like outcome when you can still put yourself into something, even if it's not solely your idea. So I think that's it. It was, I love the book, so big
Yeah.
fan.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well,
uh,
and the collaboration aspect of that is really cool. And with screenwriting MFA, that's really fascinating to me is how much collaboration there is in screenwriting.
Yeah.
And so I would think that that would make sort of a transition into doing a very collaborative book um, feel pretty comfortable. Am I wrong in that, or was it
No,
comfortable for
I'm
you?
I'm never tied to something because I
Mhm.
all through grad school when even so I had my main focus, you have to pick two focus, was screenwriting, and my minor focus was fiction. So we would go into workshops where I had thin skin in the beginning and people just tear it apart. And then by the time you graduate, you're just used to a screenplay going through 15 different people, and you have to give them what they want, but still keep your own voice and the heart of the story you want to tell. So by the time I
Yes.
graduated, I had thick skin. So by the time I entered into publishing, I wasn't tied to anything except the heart of the story and my voice. So I knew what battles to pick. So if someone came back and said, like my first book, they wanted me to rewrite a third of the story, but I was okay with that because they still kept the heart of the story and they were okay with my
Hmm.
voice. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, third of the story needs to go and I need to rewrite this. And so my daughter is now a romance writer and she is killing it. So
I
proud of her,
love
like
that.
proud mama moment, like killing it. She went viral on TikTok. Her book went viral. Um, but she's learning to have thick skin because you get reviews. And even though she's self-pubbed, you have to learn that not everyone's going to love your book.
Yeah.
So, but she went to school for psychology, not creative writing. So this is a learning process for her. So I think that's one of the benefits I had from grad school was being able just to, take it on the chin and let it roll off my shoulder.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
this is kind of a side tangent a little bit, but do you find that has social media always been extremely present since you started writing, or were you kind of able to watch the way it changed people's process overall?
So I hate social media, but my husband's like, you have to make it work for you. So I don't think I've looked at my personal Facebook account in maybe 8 years, but and I'm not really active on Facebook. Instagram's kind of an for me, but I am loyal to TikTok. I have 10 accounts. I have a TikTok lady that does another 6 accounts for me. Every day I post 2 times a day. And for my self pub, that's where I bring in all of my sales for my self pub books. And so I am very consistent and very loyal to my TikTok accounts. So, and when TikTok came out, I'm like, one more thing. But but that's how my daughter went viral was so we trade. I edit her books before it goes to her dev editor. And then she reads my books and picks out all the lines that would appeal to Gen Z. So we
Hmm,
do a little
Oh,
trade
that's
off.
a good idea.
that's
Yeah,
amazing.
That
because
is
the
a good
lines
idea.
I was picking out wasn't appealing to the audience that's on TikTok. And so she's the audience that's on TikTok. So
Right.
Yeah, she can make a
Hmm.
how
career
about
out
you
of that.
guys?
Hire her. Come pick up my books. What
Yeah.
about you, Bree? What's your relationship with social media? Has it changed over time?
Well, my first book came out when there was social media, but it wasn't such a big deal. I'm like 180 years old, y'all. So, Yeah, I mean, it has definitely been interesting and changing things. I think personally, I notice more of social media as a reader than I do as an author. Like I get so many books because I learn about them there, or somebody's recommending them, or somebody's talking about them. Like I fell down a backlist of Kate Canberry, and that was because people were talking about it on social media, and I'm like, I've actually never read her. So I went and got it, and then like 6 months later, I come up for air. Right. So for me as a reader, social media is super fun and I love that. I am a big fan of, from an author, from a business perspective, of going everywhere, simply because I think that it's important to be able to reach readers wherever they are and wherever their comfort zone is. So to me, but I have also learned to take breaks. Like I'm in the middle of a social media break for um, basically summer and finishing up some books and doing stuff like that. So I'll come back. So I think that also has been a big growth point for me, is learning that I can shut down for a little bit and come back and sit down and come back. You don't have to be there all of the time. Just most of it. Just
Yeah.
most of it.
Absolutely. And I think it's what you said about as a reader, how beneficial it's been. As long as keep
Huge.
a pulse on that, it helps motivate us to continue in whatever capacity we can like emotionally handle being on there as a
Mm-hmm.
writer. And I think, my first book was published in 2022. So not even, it feels like an eternity ago, because so much in my life has just changed in that time that I'm like, I thought that I would, get to where I wanted to go if I could be the most present. Like if I can make the most videos, if I can be the most engaged, like I'll do this. Like what's the problem? And everyone told me they, you need to protect yourself, protect your creativity. And if you're there all the time, you're going to feel it. And then I just woke up one day and was like, okay, I get it now. But
Yeah, you lose your gas for writing, and
yes.
you need that. And that's hard. I do think the feedback of I always find it interesting, the feedback that comes from social media on like what it is about a book that connects with people. Sometimes it is very much not what I'm expecting to connect. Sort of like Marina, what you talked about with the lines for that your daughter helps you pull out, the teaser copy
Right.
your daughter helps you pull out. It's always interesting, and it definitely gets me to think about my books in different ways sometimes, and that's always really nice.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
one of the things that I thought, because when I was on TikTok, I saw a lot of sexy things. And so I thought, oh, am I going to have to pull from my sex scenes? And she was saying, no, what you want to pull is your banter is so good. And that's what you need to connect with. Because even though I have sex in my books, I'm maybe a 3.5 on the sexy scale. And she's like, you don't
Yeah.
want to post a lot of sexy things, because then when they go read your books, you're marketing to the wrong audience. She's like, your banter is fantastic and you have a lot of tender moments. She's like, so you want to reach the audience that wants these tender books with a lot of funny banter in it. And so
Mm-hmm.
those are the lines. And so I thought I was marketing to the wrong audience. And so when she started pulling out those, my star reviews went up, the kind of customers I got, the conversion went up. And so
Don't you
it's
love
like
that?
it's like what you were talking about, Avery, that you start reaching the right readers and it fine tunes how you write your books and who your readers are. It gives you an insight.
Yeah. It's more
Yeah.
data.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, because I think there's a lot of pressure to lead with sexy quotes. And that is sometimes, if you're pulling the right ones, like they can be very good at getting attention. But if that's not what, if it's kind of like a bait and switch, you can see it in the reviews pretty much immediately, because they'll be like, oh, I didn't expect to have feelings. I didn't expect to cry. I didn't expect, and we're not, we're not out here looking for reviews, but they always find us, and it always becomes clear, like, okay, I have to make sure, and then, the packaging, right? I have to make sure this is reaching the right people. So
Right.
that it's everybody wins when that is the case. And
Right.
I remember thinking I was writing the most salacious thing that ever existed, because my day job is a teacher. I'm very much in like a job where I don't even swear, right? And so when I
Yeah.
got my first book, I was like, people are giving this one chili pepper. I thought this was 5 chili peppers, you know? So just even
Yeah.
as interpreting yourself, you're like, oh, I'm not,
Right.
I have to, you know, gauge myself in relation to the market I'm in. And that's always a lesson to take away, right? Is the moment
Yeah.
change, we have to be consistent to ourselves. So that actually brings me to something I was thinking about with having written multiple books and where you are both in your careers. What about this particular book will you remember, you know, 6 books from now when people are like, tell me about some of your past books? What is going to be the experience that you remember the most about it?
So for me, I think it will be 2 things. One, it will be, this was my first book with Entangled. So for me, I think it was plotting and creating with Liz. That was such an amazing experience, and I hope I get to do it again. And the other was writing my in-laws story. That was just really special to me. I had been wanting to do it for a long time, and I just hadn't found the right book. And so I think looking back, that will be what I take away from this.
I love that. I don't even know that I realized it was your first with Entangled, but that's really such a positive takeaway. I love that. Avery?
Yeah. Um, you know what? It had been a while since I had written any hockey books. And I love hockey personally. And so it was really fun to get back to that, but to do it from a different perspective with the coaches. So it was like familiar and yet new at the same time. And that was really super fun. And also, I really had fun with this book because Astrid is part of this little trio of friends. You know, Tess had her book in Anger Bang, and Nola will have her book in Giant Prick. And so I absolutely adore and love writing ensembles and writing friends and showing those combinations of people in there. And that's really fun. And I got to bring in some Hardigans in this book too. So it was really a little bit of coming home with this book, and it was just really freaking fun to write. And not every book is. Not every book is. I'm not
Not every
gonna lie
book
to you.
is.
Not every book is, but this one was really fun to write. I had a very good time.
It's that perfect blend of the nostalgia of the Hardigans and sort of what you were known for so long, right? Like that was that your
Yeah.
first series? And then, or what order were the series?
Oh God. You know what? I'm trying to think. My first Harbor City book was called The Negotiator. Is called The Negotiator. So that sort of started the whole Harbor City world. So you've got Harbor City Romance, you've got the Hardigans, you've got Ice Knights. We've got little bits and pieces here and there where they've got little things. I have made up this world, and it's super fun, and I can add anything to it that I want because it's mine. So, you know, I am currently in the process of dreaming up the perfect rugby team for Harbor City. So, I think there needs to be more thighs. More thighs in Harbor City is what needs to happen.
Amen.
So,
Amen.
amen. Amen. So it's I love being able to do that and draw that in.
That's great. Yeah, it's like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Avery Cinematic Universe.
Yes. Yes.
It's like giving
Plus,
yourself
I'm lazy. I've already created it. Why do I have to do it again? It's already
What?
there.
No, it's true. It's like a little dangling carrot for yourself. Like I get to bring back this guy from this other book and I miss him. And here we go. Everything we do is just to keep motivating ourselves, very Pavlovian little treats.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I always feel bad when people ask me about a joke or a character or something in a book, and I'm like, oh, why'd you write that? And I guess they're expecting some you know, deep insight, and I'm a shallow little person. So I was like, it made me laugh is like 99% of the time the answer to that question. So yeah, I brought that person back because they make me laugh. I like it.
like it. Well, now I'm going to be dreaming about rugby thighs. So I'm very much already looking forward
You're
to
welcome.
that. Thank you.
Welcome to those dreams.
So this is kind of a 2-part question that you can do with whatever. it's what's next, but also what is like what refills your creative well. So for example, like I am evangelical to Love Island, especially the British version for whatever
Oh,
reason.
yes.
I
I
need to
have
try
been,
that.
you must. It's
Oh, you
like,
have to.
yeah, and people are like,
Okay.
"Oh, are you shopping the psychology of the characters?" I'm like, "No, I'm literally like, oh, I don't think I've written a redhead in a while, and this one's pretty hot." It's kind of like what you said, Avery. Sometimes it really is just that shallow, and I'm like, I'm a simple person, but no, there is a lot of mining to be done in terms of like the backstories as they present them, because they are creating a narrative for you, and
Hmm.
makes it very digestible. And sometimes I'm like, I personally have not written a boxer, but now might be the time. So what is
I
your
love
what
that.
filling your creative wells right now, and does it kind of impact what you're working on?
Well, my creative wells is Love Island. It's one of my favorite shows. The British one is the original's the best.
Uh-huh.
I just finished the US version. I don't know if you watched that one.
I did.
And my sister-in-law said, "Yeah, the guy Rob, I taught him." And I'm like, "What?"
What?
And
Oh.
my sister-in-law is like, "Yeah, he's not a," but whatever. But I was like, "Oh my God, you did." He's way too young for
Oh.
me, but I'm in my 50s and he's like, what, 22? But still, I'm like, really, you did? Um, so what I'm working on now is my second book for Entangled, and it's called Love Him Not. And I would show you on my iPad the new cover, but they're doing a cover reveal next week or the week after. I can't remember.
Yay.
And
We
it
got the
follows
scoop.
like, oh, what?
I said we got the scoop next
I
week.
know the scoop, the
We-
cover reveal.
Yes.
And it follows a DIY, like America's Sweetheart YouTube star who has her own DIY show, and she flips houses, but more like restores old houses back to their glory. And she goes out on the most awful, ridiculous blind date in the history of awful, ridiculous blind dates. It's so awful that she doesn't the hero doesn't even know that he's on a blind date. And he's an ex-hockey star. And while they're on this date, he just plays along with it because he thinks she's cute. So while they're on the date, on the big screen comes a sex tape of him with a woman that just gets released, but it's him like 4 years ago. And he didn't know it was going to be released. And she's like, he's like, "Trust me, I'm not this guy anymore." Da 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 da. And she starts figuring out, she's like, "Do you even know who I am?" And he's like, "No." She's like, "Did you even know we were supposed to be on a blind date?" He's like, "No." She's like, "So you led me on this entire time?" So the next week she shows up to her brand new show that's actually like on a home channel, not just on YouTube, but on a home channel. It's her big break. And she's redoing her great aunt's house in the Hollywood Hills. And she's getting a co-star for the first time. And in walks in the most awful, ridiculous date ever. And neither one of them want to work with each other. But the producer says, "Look, you both signed a contract. So if either one of you walk away, I'm going to sue you." Even worse, it's a locked set. So it's a one bed trope. They have to share the set. And
It's just one trailer.
exactly. And they think it's a renovation show, but there's a big secret that I can't reveal that the cast and crew is in on that they don't know.
Oh my
So I
God.
can't reveal what it is because that will reveal the whole book. But I'm super excited
She's
about it. It's my
taunting
second
us.
Entangled
I
book.
think that's rude. I think she's taunting us.
But
I
this
think
was one of those books that I pitched to Entangled, and I started writing. And I'm like, did I write myself into a corner? Can I actually write this book? And I started freaking out that I had pitched them a book that I couldn't write. And then I sat down with my plot partner, and she's like, "Okay, calm down." And we got through the whole plotting thing. And I'm like, "Okay, I could do this. I could do this." But for a minute there, I thought, "Oh my God, I pitched a book that I can't write." And that's never happened to me before. But no, so it's due in 2.5 weeks, and it's going fabulously, and it's going to be a really funny, great book. So how about you, Avery?
Sounds
What are you
awesome.
working on?
That sounds awesome. Well, so I have Giant Prick, which is coming. I'm not quite sure yet, but that is really fun, and that will be the third book in the series. And if you've read Walk of Shame, you already know who the couple is in it, and the fact that they get married. And I got a lot of people throwing that book across the room. And all I can tell you is I was very inspired by people saying that and this probably says a little bit too much about me, that enemies to lovers, which is my favorite trope, doesn't work in contemporary romance because there's no reason for two people to be complete enemies. And I am very contrarian. So that immediately made me go, oh, yeah, let's do it. So they most definitely have reasons to be enemies. And that is because Nola is Astrid from Walk of Shame's best friend. And the hero is Tig, the hockey player who dumped her at the altar in the first thing. And if you're going to be enemies with anybody and hate them with all of your being, it's the person who screwed over your best friend. You hate them. There is no in between there. So that's where we start off with is very enemies. So there you go. So that will be really fun. And then in non-entangled books, I just got the cover of my second witch book, which is going to be called Head Witch in Charge. That's going to be out in October of next year, not this year. And the cover is Lenny Kaufman beautiful. So that's really exciting. And I also refilling my well. So maybe not Love Island. I'm going to check that out. But Homicide: Life in the Street, they just dropped all of the episodes. They've never been streaming before. So I'm watching early 90s dark cop shows set in Baltimore because that's what every rom-com writer does to refill the well.
Of course.
Yeah.
Honestly,
A little murder and mayhem.
If we were all pulling from the same well, then we would all have 22-year-old snake wranglers from Love Island USA. So we
exactly.
I am so watching this show. You guys have done it.
I'm gonna go watch.
I love it.
Well, I mean, honestly, there's a lot of hot guy energy coming from cop shows and from detectives and all these true crimes. I'm sorry, there just is. I can't. But you know, I think both of you have created, like, now I need to have both of these books in my hands. I will have to patiently wait and or email like the black market, like, how do I get an early copy? So I'm so excited about that. We do have a question in the chat. If your character has a certain profession, how do you research it? Do you read about it, talk to people in that field? So Marina, you want to go first?
Yes. Actually, when I did my St. Helena Vineyard series, book 3, Autumn in the Vineyard, it was about and it was an enemies to lovers, and it was two vintners who were going head to head to buy the same piece of property that was a vineyard. And I knew nothing about how to build a vineyard, even though I lived in the Napa Valley at the time, how to build a vineyard from soil up. And so a friend of mine, his family owned the 3rd oldest vineyard in the Napa Valley. So he was nice enough to introduce me to his uncle who ran the vineyard. And so he invited me up to the vineyard, and I spent, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 days. And he walked me through how to build one from the soil up. And it was fascinating. A lot of terms I didn't understand. But he walked me all through it. It was very scientific. And I learned the difference between some people approach it from a very scientific and other people approach it from a very artistic point of view. And it was fascinating. And so it really helped me out on that book. And there were 8 books in the series. And so the whole series was about 2 rival wine families. And so it helped me throughout the whole series.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then some books I just research online, and other books I get ideas from watching TV shows, and that's my research.
So yeah, reminds me of watching A Parent Trap as a little girl and being like Dennis Quaid and his vineyard and thinking like someday I want to go to a vineyard, and how those little kernels become ideas later. And I'm sitting here like writing a romance in my head between a version of you who is single and this guy giving you a vineyard tour, you know, inspiration striking from all over.
I love it.
Yeah.
Avery?
Yeah, no, same answer. Sometimes I'm lucky enough to get to talk to people in person. Sometimes you just, you question what the FBI thinks of you as they watch your Google search. So it's all of that and a little in between, but I really enjoy picking out jobs for a lot of my heroines that are just fantasy fuel for me. Like I had in parental guidance, the heroine in that book, she is a miniaturist. So that was really cool to me. I am not artistically talented at all. So, going and researching that and figuring out how somebody could do that. And it was just really interesting and cool. So, yeah, it's a lot of fantasy fuel for me. What about you?
Does But Avery, really quick, does being a journalist help you when you're interviewing people about a job because you have that background?
Maybe a little. I mean, most of the time as a journalist, I was talking to people about, the murder victim or, the drug bust. I was a crime reporter, so slightly different. That might explain my homicide life on the street. But it definitely, I think it makes it more comfortable for me to ask questions. That's for sure. I think that.
I also really love the phrase fantasy fuel because I don't know. I guess it's just by virtue of being a writer, or maybe we become writers because of this impulse to want to try everything on. I want to try on
Yeah.
I want to try on every possible life that I can't live, right? And so you get to sort of do it when you're writing these characters. But I definitely had to learn through my first book, which was about audiobook narrators. I knew nothing about audiobook narration. Yes, talk flirty to me. And when I initially, sent it to Entangled, one thing about my editor, that my favorite thing about her, because it's so different than me, is that she is meticulous about like factual things. Like she wants it to feel as realistic as possible. Sometimes obviously you have to invent a town or you have to invent certain things, but when it comes to like something being correct and functioning right, she's like on it. And she didn't question one thing about the audiobook narration. And at the end, she's like, gosh, like, how did you research all that? And I was like, no, I made it all up. Like I completely invented it so that, so that it would
You
work.
just got her that good. You're
I
like,
know,
I'm just
like,
that good.
well, part of it was, when you're writing and you kind of go down this rabbit hole and you really have to commit. I'm like, well, I said they have to record in the booth. They cannot possibly be outside of this closet booth. Okay, well, now that they're in there, they have to, like, you kind of write yourself into a corner, like somebody said earlier, and then you just have to own it. I'm like, no, if they leave the booth, they'll die. That's part of the plot. So,
The
the
floor is lava.
floor is lava. But yeah, now
Lava.
I'm a lot more research. I got lucky once, but I can't get lucky again. So I actually have to research these jobs. Because they'll
Yeah.
tell you, there's always going to be that one niche person who's like, I'm actually a florist who specializes in ferns, and here's where you went wrong. And you don't want to go to like
Yeah.
court with that person, but yes.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any other questions? I only see one in the chat. I will start talking about Love Island again. I am not afraid to go down that. But while we're waiting, what are you guys reading right now? I know it's hard because you're reading for work purposes, you're reading for friends, but what are you reading that is purely just for you?
Oh, I just finished. Emily Henry is one of my favorite new authors. And I just finished Funny Story. So my bio said I lived in Northern California, where I was born and raised. I lived there for over 50 years. And my husband's job just took us from California to North Carolina a month ago. And
Oh,
so
wow.
on the airplane ride over, I devoured her new book, Funny Story. Loved it so much. If you haven't read it, pick it up. Literally on the plane ride, like sped through it. It was so good. And now I'm reading the book that came out right before that. And it was halfway through it, and I can't remember what it's called. It just flew out of my brain. But yeah, I love Emily Henry. I love Tessa Bailey. I love Jill Chavez. Shout out to Jill, one of my best girlfriends. So yeah, that's who I read like as my passion reader, is my go-to author, or my passion authors, my go-to auto buys. How about you, Avery?
I have a ton of auto by authors. I am super excited. Let's see. I am currently reading Bridesmaid for Hire by Megan Quinn, which is absolutely hilarious. I'm still very early because I'm a slow reader, easily distracted. I know you're shocked. But I've started that, and that has been pretty hysterical. I read a not romance book recently called How to Become a Dark Lord and Die Trying. There is it's absolutely bizarre. It takes probably 100 pages to get into, but once you're really into it, oh my God, it just flies by. It's very, very funny. And I'm blanking out Kimberly Lemming. That is the name. I am really excited because she has an alien book coming out, and I devoured her whole series that starts with That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. Her books are absolutely hysterical. I love them so much. And she was talking about her alien book on something I was on, and I'm like, I would love to read an early copy of that, Livy. The key is no shame. No shame. None. And then like the next day I got an email from a publicist who said, really, would you like to? And I said, yes.
It's the benefit of being an author.
Yeah.
It's
no
our
shame is the key for early copies. None.
you're gonna
So I'm very much looking forward to that book when it comes out. So yeah.
love it. Yeah, if you see me in the comments asking for things, you didn't see me there. Mind your business, right? I'm just
Yeah,
on every.
mind your business.
I also read Funny Story on a Plane recently, funny enough, and so good. Everything Emily does is amazing, and I can't imagine the pressure to keep matching her last book, but
I know. They just keep getting better.
I know. Okay, is there a certain place or certain item you need in your writing space in order to stay focused? I didn't know focus was an option, so I hope you guys have better.
um I will write anywhere under any circumstances. I've written a lot in the car while kids are at sports practices. I have written in coffee shops. I have written outside on the deck. I've written in my office. I've written in bed. I'll go anywhere, and can tend to block out just about everything. So that, yeah, reading distracted, writing when I'm in the zone, no problems.
Oh, I'm so jealous. I have to, like I said, my office, the bed, or the couch, and it has to be quiet. And the item I have to have is normally one of my cats on my lap.
Aww.
Not on my lap, but like right next to me or at my feet if I'm at my office desk.
Oh, I love
Very
that.
They calm me.
I can write anywhere. The more things working against me, the better. I'm like trying to slay demons by writing. Like if I can write through my children yelling, some things that like that's when I actually focus the best because it almost puts a ticking clock on me. Like, all right, you probably have about 3 minutes before somebody dies. You better, and so I can actually faster. But reading, I can't. So it's the same. Like that's the hardest part of being an author for me is that it's really changed my relationship with reading. It's made it harder in a lot of ways because the best case scenario is I'm reading an incredible book and then I'm getting ideas, I'm getting all, and then I want to pause and go write something down. Or, if I'm not engaging, I'm like, oh no, what's wrong? Something's wrong with me. I'm not enjoying this. Let me come back to it. And so, yeah, it's interesting how they're very different mental demands. All right, next question. How do you celebrate the release of a new novel? Do you have any traditions?
I
Normally
clean my
my
office because it's been a crap pit for like 6 months. So I throw away all of the wrappers and the empty bottles and all of that. That's my is cleaning up after myself.
I'll binge something, whether it's like Love Island. When I finish this book in 2 to 3 weeks, I'm going to be binging Million Dollar Listing, Los Angeles. Love that show. And then normally my husband and I will go out to eat or something. But I normally, because I write 3.5 to 4 books a year, So I normally only take 3 to 4 days off, and then I start my next project.
Oh,
But
wow.
I don't know, are you guys the same? I'm usually in the process of doing 3 to 4 books at a time, or 2 to 3 books at a time, where I'm editing one, plotting another, submitting one, and writing one. I always have a bunch juggling in the air at one time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
at some point in time, I have learned that I have to empty my head. If I don't empty my head before I start the writing part, then the old characters are still there and it's really hard for me to transition. I can take a short break and do editing or copy edits or galleys or all of that sort of stuff. But I need a good solid week after finishing a book before I can start working on the next book.
Right.
Otherwise, it just all melds together and then it's just not as fun.
And then you have to go
Yeah.
back and rewrite a lot, and that actually takes more time than just taking a couple days of rest.
Yes, I hate
Yeah.
that. It is so true though. But yeah,
Yeah, and I'm a dyslexia teacher, so it's basically like a special ed teacher, but I work with small groups. So, I have a full-time job, and so any spare moment I have, I'm learning, not well or quickly, but I'm learning how to be the most effective with that time, because when I do have long stretches of time off in summer, or I did take a year off to write some of these books, I'm actually I write just as much as when I'm working, but because it's about channeling that time the most effectively. And so sometimes that is a break, and sometimes that is a marathon binge, because you need to be able to be fast when you sit down to the computer, or else it's wasted time, and nobody wants that.
Yeah.
What does writing a successful novel look like to you? How do you define success as an author? I'm going to call my therapist.
Yeah.
Um, I think a successful book to me is 2 parts. One is when I feel like I'm happy with the book and how it turned out. So first and foremost is how I feel about the book. If I feel like I connected with the book, I like how my voice turned out, I like how the heart of the book turned out. So the creative result of the book. But then at the second point, I also judge conversion success. So commercially, how successful the book was, because in the end, this is a business.
Mhm.
And then what was the second part of the question?
How do you define success as an author? So maybe book versus your own author success. It's one and the same,
I
really.
guess the author success would be the creative part of it. So I guess I answered both parts.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say I would say the same thing. You want to have a book that when you look up on your shelf and you see it, you're like happy memories, as opposed to, oh my God, turn that book around. Right. And we all have at least, I would like to think we all have at least one book that we would like to turn around, just because the process itself was harder maybe than some of the others. And the business side does come into it because, I like to eat. So I have to be able to pay for groceries. So yeah, so being able to buy groceries is a big part of that success to me.
Yeah.
Definition.
And those books you turn around, I think every book, when I look at it, I always have a feeling associated with each book, and it's more to do with where I was emotionally while writing it. It's not even about the book itself. It's like at that time, not in a good place, and I remember it.
Yeah, it's like a little bit of a talisman in a way for that, on where you were in your personal emotional journey, all that good stuff.
The bumpy road. And you know what? The books, like our editors or, anybody in publishing, will sometimes attribute as our successful ones, are not the ones that like we are like, are you sure? Or vice versa.
Really?
Sometimes I love something and my editor's like, oh yeah, that one. Like it wasn't her favorite. Right. And so it's just funny
Right.
how it's just, we're very like enigmatic weirdos. Like we just, we're emotionally volatile that way. Like it's the muse, right? You're always like, it's very temperamental, what we love and what we feel good about and what we don't. But last question, what do you love most about being a romance author? Have you ever thought about writing a different genre?
To me, I don't think I would write another genre. I love reading contemporary romance. I love writing it. And I love the fact that my childhood was kind of rough. So I love the fact that in the end, it doesn't matter what they went through as a kid or as an adult, or if they were awkward, if they didn't get the boy in high school, whatever it may be, that you could be that awkward girl, whatever it is. And in the end, you still find your happily ever after. And so I love that the world is funny and witty and happy and the happily ever after. And so that's what I love about being a romance writer, especially when right now the world is so divided and there's so much fear and whatever. I think it's even more important now that we write happy things and uplifting things.
For sure.
And then I get to be funny. I love being funny. I'm not as funny in person, but when I really think about it, I could be funny.
You're very funny. Your books are very funny too.
Thank you.
Wow. My favorite thing about being a romance author actually ties back to being a hardcore romance reader my entire life, from the time when, you used to get 4 Harlequins mailed to you in a box with the weird necklace. So, I know that feeling that I get from reading romance. And for as much as, like, sometimes I want to turn the books around or I get really tired, it is always such a cool experience to realize, or have a reader come up to you. And this can make me a little emotional because I'm a wimp, but and you get to give that feeling to somebody else. And that is huge because I know what romance books have done for me. Got me through some really hard times or helped me celebrate great times or all of that stuff. So realizing that, one of your books is that book for somebody else, how do you beat that? That is phenomenal. That is phenomenal. And I have thought about writing other genres, and I may someday, and there will probably be, bloody homicide, life on the street type, dead bodies in it. I don't know. But still, I will still make them kiss. Make them kiss. There will always be make them kiss.
Yes, absolutely.
You got me emotional. That was really beautifully put, Avery.
But that's pretty awe-inspiring and intimidating at the same time. How about you, Livy? What do you love most?
I mean, absolutely that. And you really feel that the most on those, like, you go to author events and it's such a gift and privilege to be there and you're very aware of it. But sometimes you're like on a deadline and you're tired and you have a sick kid at home and you're just like, okay, I what am I doing with myself? And then somebody comes up to you and says, hey, your book meant this to me. And they tell you a really personal story and you're like, oh my gosh, like it all comes flooding back. Like, this is why I do it. It's,
It's
yes,
all circular.
yeah, yes, we have to pay the bills. Yes, but it's first of all, I always say I have to be a writer because I can't stop. It's a compulsion.
Yeah.
Like, even if I wasn't a writer, I would still be writing. So why not just keep going? But yeah, just that moment when you connect with someone, you're like, okay, what someone has given to me, I'm going to give it to someone else. And it's just this beautiful exchange of stories. And, I was a little girl with a really, really rough childhood too. And it was like, it saved my life to be able to escape. And so even though I don't ever really get into the discussions about what romance is or, it's not deep, it's whatever, like it means what it means to you. And to me, I needed something that was fluffy. I needed something that didn't feel like my real life. Like, there's a place for every kind of book. And for me, I want to write funny books that maybe don't touch on some of the things that other people are trying to avoid. And that is just as valid as writing a cathartic book that does touch on those topics. Like, there is a place for everything on the shelf. And I just want to write really like ridiculous premises sometimes. And that's what I just love to escape. So that's kind of my why romance. And I would write other genres. I have a lot of other ideas, but I also have to like be disciplined because otherwise I will try to put out like all these different things and it won't ultimately serve me. So I'm really trying to be more careful with what I choose so I don't, end up with like 16 different genres and none of them, trying to be careful so I don't go wild.
Yeah.
Oh yes, well,
Writers Gone Wild, the Livy Hart story.
I say that and it would be
I
like
watched that.
it would be like
I would watch that. We would watch that after we finished a book.
Yes, right. We would binge. Well, thank you so much for coming. If we have no other questions, I think that's time. And Marina has a book to write, so we got to let her go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we want to read it. So
Well, thanks everyone for coming.
Oh,
yes, thank you guys.
great.
Aw.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this event. And thank you, of course, for three lovely authors. It's been such a pleasure hearing you all talk today. I hope everyone has an amazing weekend and an even better Labor Day.
Thank you.